We begin with a strange proposal. Lay down everything. No touch, no word, no ritual, no technique, no affirmations. Let your hands be still, your tongue quiet, your mind refused its toys. Let the props fall to the floor, and do not stoop to gather them. Stop, stop. If healing were a product of touch, then the most skilled hands would hold the kingdom. If it were in speech, the most eloquent would be the saviors of men. If it were in ritual, the carefulness of performance would be our God. But the Master said, I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. Do you hear? That is our orientation. This is the paradox that governs our work. Healing is not something sent from one person to another. Healing is the uncovering of what is already true in God. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. If that is truth, then lack is not removed by might or word. It is seen as never having place in the presence. Be still and know that I am God. Not know a doctrine, not recite a creed. Know. And how shall you know? By being still until the noisy mind runs out of breath. Now the mind protests. What then am I to do? How shall I begin? And I say to you, begin by ending, end doing, end directing, end organizing God. Have the courage to sit in your inadequacy and confess, I can of my own self do nothing. Be very firm in your understanding of your own inadequacy. It is the gate that does not swing to human pressure, but opens to grace. As long as you believe there is power in a good thought, you are far from the kingdom. Thought is not power. God is power. Therefore, God is one. If there is one presence, who is healing whom? Where could disease stand? In what corner of omnipresence can a rival erect its little tent and defy the infinite? Who, by taking thought, can add a cubit to his stature, or make one hair white or black, or still the wind and sea? Not you, not I. Yet when the Master slept in the boat, the sea took its orders from the silence that is not apathy, the stillness that is not indifference. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Not where the will of man is, not where the technique is, where the Spirit is. Come then to this course with a soft but resolute heart. We will not be practicing performance. We will be practicing surrender. We will not learn to push a power. We will sit down in the one power and let it be what it already and forever is. Your prayers will not be speeches. Hold those teeth together if you must until the habit of telling God subsides. Let your tongue fall out rather than instruct omniscience. Acquaint now thyself with him and be at peace, not with words about him, but with him. You may say, but without words, without touch, without method, how shall anything happen? That is the old dependency speaking, the fear that if your hands are not on the wheel, the car will crash. My thoughts are not your thoughts, saith the Lord. Neither are your ways my ways. In him we live and move and have our being. He is not far from any one of us. When the props are removed, only God remains, and that is where healing begins. Not the healing you imagine, timed and measured, the harmony that is the fact of God appearing as your experience. I am the Lord that healeth thee, not by command, not by bargaining, but by the simple isness of being made evident when obstruction ends. So we begin where endings gather, the end of self as doer, the end of two powers, the end of bargaining prayer. Sit then, breathe if you must, but more than breath, yield. God is. Say no more, think no more. Let the recognition dawn of itself, and watch how the mind, denied its props, quietly bows. Here, In the nakedness of no technique, the robe of grace is found already upon you. Now let us set the foundation without embroidery. God is one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. If God is one, how many powers can there be? Not two, not God and disease, not God and chance, not God and heredity, not God and a prognosis that whispers in the night. One presence means one power, and that power is not personal. It is not in you more than in me. It is not in me more than in you. It is not ours to wield. It is the I am that is. I am God, and there is none else. If that is so, where would a second force sit? In what corner of omnipresence does a rival set up shop? We are trained to fear the shadows on the wall and then to fight them. We run to fix, to treat, to argue, to outthink. As long as you believe there is power in a good thought, you are far from the kingdom. Thought is not power. God is power. Therefore, God is one. If you are pushing a positive thought against a negative one, you have already conceded two powers and the game is lost at the start. Who by taking thought can add a cubit to his stature? Because thought is not God, the latter is not the spirit. The mind that engineers a technique is not the presence that heals. Let me press you with questions the way the spirit presses me. If God fills all space, where does disease exist that it might move toward you or away from you? If God is cause, what cause is left for hereditary doom? If the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, what room remains outside fullness for a prognosis to be true? If not a sparrow falls without the Father, what power drops the sparrow when the Father is present? Where can a second will hide from omnipresence? Where? You see the subtle snare. When you set yourself to do something, to fix something, you have quietly installed a second presence in your consciousness. You have made a little god of the problem and a little god of your effort, and then you have tried to play Moses between them. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, not other gods of fear, not other gods of faith and thought, not other gods of well-meaning effort. Do not set anything before the I am, not even your desire for a result. Consider the master before Pilate. Knowest thou not that I have power over thee? Pilate blustered, and the master answered, Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Do you hear the secret? He did not argue, and he did not perform. He recognized one power and let every boast of a second fall of its own weight. That is denial without struggle. That is freedom without strain. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, not where the human will prevails, but where oneness is acknowledged. Therefore, let us be very simple. God is. That's all. Not as affirmation against an opposite, but as the end of an opposite. God is ends the sentence, and with it the urge to argue. God is closes the door behind which fear keeps its furniture. God is not a tool wielded by a person. It is the recognition that there is no person to wield and no second presence to resist. Be still and know that I am God. Be still long enough for the two-word treatment to dissolve the habit of twowness. God is. If you must have a practice, let it be this. When the appearance shouts, do not answer it. Do not dignify it with a counter shout. Close your mouth. Close the inner mouth as well. Sit in the presence that already is, and let the reality of one power unmask the pretense of a second. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. As you accept one presence, every competing claim loses its breath. You have not conquered, you have simply ceased to imagine a battlefield. God is. That's all. Why do we cling to touch and technique? Because the senses seem faithful friends. We trust what we can grasp, count, polish, repeat, a hand on a shoulder, a phrase on the tongue, a ritual at dawn. These give the personal sense a job to do. They steady the nerves the way a child holds a stick in the dark, and the mind says, here is something. Here is my part, Thomas said. Except I put my finger into the print of the nails, I will not believe. And the answer came, be not faithless, but believing. Blessed are they that have not seen, and yet have believed. The habit is ancient. We crave something we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and think. But you cannot touch God. You cannot rub God into the body as an ointment. You cannot fold God into a phrase as a charm. God is spirit, and they that worship must worship in spirit and in truth. Notice what a method whispers beneath its polished manners. It says, I am here. The patient is there, and God must be persuaded to come in between. That is the subtle proclamation of separation. The moment you have a technique, you have a path laid between 2 points, and immediately you have conceded 2 points. You have yourself as doer and another as receiver, and a God who must be signaled like a far-off ship. Then the transaction begins. I give treatment, you receive results. The practitioner becomes the agent, the body, the battleground, the condition, the enemy, and the session, the hour of war. With the best of intentions, the heart has quietly left the holy ground of I and my Father are one, and entered the marketplace of buying and selling outcomes. But the temple was not made for that. Do you remember? The master sat and wove a little scourge and drove the traffic out of consciousness. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, no other gods of method, no other gods of well-meaning doing. Why do these things feel so safe? Because they employ the personal doer. To perform a method is to reassure the sense of me. I am necessary. I am effective. I know what to do. But listen to the axiom that ends it. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. As long as you hold to a technique as power, you hold to a second power. As long as you trust a formula to move God, you have fashioned an idol of words. The letter killeth, the spirit giveth life. The letter of truth may point. It cannot perform. Touch may comfort, words may calm, ritual may quiet the surface, but none of these can usher the infinite into a room already full of the belief that something must be done. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. There is another flaw hidden in the comfort. Whatever is built by personal will must be maintained by personal will. You may perfect a sequence of affirmations and enjoy a season of relief. You may practice a laying on of hands and see a change. But listen well. If fear arises, and it will, who then maintains the change? You do. And when fatigue begins, and it will, who holds it together? You do. And when a stronger appearance shouts, and it will, who argues back? You do. That structure will wobble under the weight of the very doer who built it, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. Human might may shuffle appearances. It cannot reveal the truth that was there before any appearance. I had a dear one come and say, for years I held a treatment. 5 statements, 2 silences, 1 touch. Often it worked. Then came a case where nothing moved, and fear covered me. What failed? Not God, not the patient. What failed was the belief that a person could cause the invisible to appear by sequence and emphasis. When we sat together and ceased the transaction, no giving, no receiving, no instructing, we entered the silence where there are not 2, be still, and know that I am God. In that stillness, the battleground vanished, because there was no longer a warrior to man it. The result that followed was not the prize of technique. It was the peace that passes understanding, revealing itself as harmony. Do you see the appearance yielded where the personal doer surrendered? So let us be tender but exact. If your fingers itch to touch, if your lips itch to speak, if your mind itches to line up sentences like soldiers, pause. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let your tongue fall out before you instruct omniscience. Resist not evil, not because evil has power, but because resistance presumes an opposite power. The two-word treatment is enough. God is. Not God is and I will help. Not God is and here is my method. God is. In that recognition, the imagined distance between practitioner and patient dissolves. The imagined need to move, God disappears, and the quiet fact stands revealed. Where oneness is acknowledged, harmony is present as itself. Stop. Stop. Let the props go. Let the heart discover that safety does not live in the doer or the device. Safety lives where it always has, in the one presence that needs no help to be all that it is. Let us now come to the threshold where everything turns, and let us not tiptoe. The Master did not flatter the human sense when he said, I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. That is not poetry. It is procedure. That is not modesty. It is law. The door to healing is marked by that confession, and it will not open to any other key. As long as there remains in you one hidden hope that your thought can lift a burden, that your character can inspire a change, that your zeal can push a result across the line, you stand outside the door rehearsing your credentials. Be very firm in your understanding of your own inadequacy. Not morbid, not self-scolding. Firm. Who by taking thought can add a cubit to his stature? Who, by intensity of affection, can shift even one hair from white to black? You know the answer. Then stand upon it. Do not confuse this with passivity. This is not giving up. This is giving up the imposter who was never the worker. Surrender does not mean you fold your hands and wait for luck. Surrender means you yield the false sense of I that imagines it must and can do, so that the I that is God may be itself. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Not stand numb. Stand still. Inner stillness. Thought laid down. Will relaxed. The habit of managing dismissed. The letter killeth. The spirit giveth life. In humility, the personal tongue falls silent. In humility, the personal hand unclenches. In humility, the heart whispers only, not my will, but thine be done. And in that very breath, activity begins, not yours, the activity of grace, revealing what was never absent. This has a practical effect, immediate and unmistakable. The instant you stop trying to send help across a distance, the distance collapses. The instant you refuse to arrange God for another, you become receptive to the presence that already constitutes both of you. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Do you think the knocking stops because you are clever? The door is not hinged on technique. It swings on surrender. When you cease to project, you begin to receive. When you desist from treatment as transmission, consciousness turns like a flower toward the sun into awareness of the one that is, God is. That is the turning. That is the methodless method. In that recognition, the very premise of doing dissolves in harmony, stands unhidden because you are no longer standing in front of it with your good intentions. I knew a fisherman who came to me with a brave face and weary eyes. I have prayed hard, he said, and she grows no better. I have sent thoughts, spoken words, fasted, fastened verses to the wall. I asked him, who is praying? He wept a little. We sat then without speech. He folded those strong hands that had knotted nets all his life and said, Father, if I am in the way, move me. That was all. No bargaining, no pleading, no program. A soft peace entered the room, not new, simply noticed. The house did not change. The presence that fills houses was acknowledged. In the hours that followed, appearances shifted. But hear me, the miracle was not in the shift. The miracle was in the end of a doer. My grace is sufficient for thee. Sufficient for what? For being what God is, as the only life there is, where no personal arm of flesh is asked to hold up the universe. Let this be your vow and your relief. No man has ever lived capable of healing another person spiritually. Be thankful, because in surrendering that fantasy, you step off the stage and into the sanctuary. Then your only word, if a word must come, is, Father, reveal thyself. And you wait not in vacancy, but in holy receptivity. Close your mouth. Close the inner mouth. Let the quiet in you be the manger in which the Christ appears, not as a visitation, but as the fact of your being. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the spirit of the practitioner is, there is effort. Choose. Healing begins at the exact point where personal doership ends, and from that point on, the Father within you doeth the works. Stop, and let God be God. There are two parts to this work. Do not confuse them. There is the letter of truth, and there is the spirit of truth. The letter is every statement, every passage, every noble arrangement of thought that points to God. The spirit is the realized presence, the living God as awareness. The letter is preparatory. The spirit alone heals. The letter killeth. The spirit giveth life. If you stop at the letter, you have a map in your pocket and never take the journey. If you yield to the spirit, the country of God appears as your very being. Why, then, do we study? To let the mind be brought to the quiet edge. The letter lifts the restlessness, soothes the fear, clears a path through thicketed habit up to the gate. But hear me, the letter is not the gate. It brings you to the gate, not by might nor by power, not by syllables aligned like soldiers on a page, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. Can ink carry infinity? Can a well-arranged sentence bear omnipresence from here to there? Who by taking thought can add a cubit to his stature? Who by repeating holy words can push God into a room God already fills? Our Master warned us, when ye pray, use not vain repetitions. Why? Because repetition easily becomes noise, and noise is the mind's disguise for fear. Vain repetitions keep the mouth busy and the heart preoccupied. They mimic faith while avoiding surrender. I have heard 1,000 affirmations chanted like slogans on a battlefield, and the very breath that utters them announces two powers, the problem and the thought that must vanquish it. As long as you believe there is power in a good thought, you are far from the kingdom. Thought is not power. God is power. Therefore, God is one. Do not misunderstand. The letter is holy in its place. Scripture, statements of truth, these are your crutches while the leg of the heart relearns its walk. Use them to come to the brink. Let the Psalms calm the wind in you. Let the Gospels unseat the little tyrant who thinks to do the works. But when you come to the brink, stop, be still, and know that I am God. Not be still and continue to explain God. Not be still and begin to bargain. Be still and know. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let your tongue fall out before you tell omniscience what omniscience should do. Treat God as God. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. There is a craft to this silence, and it is the simplest craft in the world because there is nothing to make. Sit down within yourself and let every good phrase pass like a bird beyond the window. Thank it for bringing you to the window, but do not call it back. The finger that points to the moon is not the moon. The rung that lifts you to the roof is not the roof. Having been carried by the letter to the threshold, surrender the letter to the Spirit. If a holy word arises, God is, do not swing it as a sword. Let it be a key that falls from your hand the moment the door opens. God is not utterance. It is the end of utterance, the subsiding of mind into presence. And in that wordless knowing, grace appears, not produced, not persuaded, revealed. For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where speech strives, there is effort. Where silence yields, there is God. My thoughts are not your thoughts, saith the Lord, so let your thoughts rest. Let the river of phrases empty into the sea of awareness. Then the prayer that remains is not yours at all. It is the life of God recognizing itself as the only life. Words may point to truth, but only realized consciousness embodies it. Therefore, use the letter well and then lay it down. Enter the hush, be still, and know prayer then must be turned on its head. True prayer puts you on the receiving end of God, not on the broadcasting end of human need. When ye pray, enter into thy closet and shut the door. Shut the door on the tongue. Shut the door on the agenda. Shut the door on the dear, noisy mind that would compose speeches for omniscience. Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask. Do you see? To ask as if God were uninformed is to pray to a God of your imagining. To direct as if God were reluctant is to confess that you believe in two powers, yours and his, and you hope to persuade his with yours. Stop. Stop. Let prayer be what it is. Receptivity. Silence that is listening. A stillness poised like a cup beneath a spring. Will is the wrong instrument. To will healing is to declare a condition real and then try to overpower it. That is war, and all war presumes two powers. As long as you believe there is power in a good thought, you are far from the kingdom. Thought is not power. God is power. Therefore, God is one, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. Every time you strain, even nobly, you strengthen the belief that something other than God stands on the field. Resist not evil. Not because evil is to be cuddled, but because resistance breathes life into a shadow. One presence means no second presence demanding rebuttal. Rest in that, and you will discover that prayer does not push, it yields. Here is the inward movement. Withdraw your attention from the report of the senses, not fighting them, simply letting their parade pass by. Turn within as the Master instructed. The kingdom of God is within you. Sit quietly, be still, and know that I am God. If a word must arise, let it be God is, and let that too fall away the moment the heart enters awareness. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let your tongue fall out before you tell omniscience what to do. Become as a listening more than a thinker, an availability more than a director. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Not acquaint thyself with a plan, not with a timetable. Acquaint thyself with him. In that wordless acquaintance, you will feel no heroism, no exertion, only a gentle subsiding of the sense of I that manages, I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. Let that be not a sentence, but a surrender. And what then is the evidence? Harmony appears not with trumpets, more often as the still small voice Elijah knew after the wind and earthquake and fire were finished with their noise. Grace is not produced, it is recognized. My grace is sufficient for thee. Sufficient for what? For being what God is, wholeness being whole, life being life, love being love, without your coaxing. Sometimes the appearance shifts at once. Sometimes nothing outward changes, and yet the room is different, because the only life in the room has been noticed. Often it comes quietly, an ease in the breath, a softening of fear, a phone call that arrives of its own accord, a strength you did not build returning of itself. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That is not drama, that is order. The naturalness of God, being God, where you no longer compete to be. So reverse your prayer. Do not ask, do not direct, receive. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, for your life is more than meat. Sit and become the receiving end of God. In that holy passivity that is not apathy but attentiveness, the river of grace runs without obstruction. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the spirit of man directs, there is effort. Choose the listening. Choose the stillness. Let grace find you as it always has, and you will discover that prayer is not a cause of harmony, but the clearing away of what would hide the harmony that is, God is. That's all. And in that allness, sufficiency appears as your experience, without might, without power, by His Spirit alone. Let us say now the non-negotiable, and be done with arguments. God and the practitioner and the patient are all one, not like one, not becoming one, one. I and my Father are one. And if that is true, where is a second life to be helped from outside? In Him we live and move and have our being. If that is true, where, then, is the patient living, moving, and being, if not in God? Show me the address where God is not. Show me the border of omnipresence. Where is the over there you intend to reach? Where? We imagine a scene. Here I sit, there you lie, and somewhere between us God must be induced to travel. But God is not a courier. God is the whole. God is one. If the Spirit fills all in all, then what distance remains to cross, and what other remains to correct? Where is the practitioner outside of God that he should import divinity into a foreign land? Where could a diseased mind exist outside omniscience, that knowledge must be beamed toward it like a lamp into a cave? If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. Do you hear it? The argument for sending collapses because there is no place to send to and no sender to send. What, then, is a practitioner? Not a healer at all. No man has ever lived capable of healing another person spiritually. A practitioner is a state of consciousness that knows this truth. God is one and abides there without negotiation. That is all. That which constitutes a practitioner is just the state of consciousness that knows this truth. The work is not to project, not to direct, not to press thought outward, but to rest as awareness of oneness until the belief in Oneness, practitioner here, patient there, dissolves. Where two or more are gathered in my name, my nature of oneness there am I in the midst. The gathering is not across chairs. It is the convergence of recognition upon one presence. But is this not impersonal, even cold? No, it is the end of manipulation, and therefore the highest ethics. Love thy neighbor as thyself is not affection between two. It is recognition that there are not two. Non-contact healing, rightly understood, is not refusal to care. It is refusal to coerce. It does not enter another's mind to bend it like iron. It does not impose suggestion, for suggestion proclaims two powers and an absent God. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. That is the divine ethic presence offered, never forced. True prayer respects autonomy because it knows there is only God's self appearing as all. What, then, would you control? Whom would you invade when the only whom is the one? You will find, as you sit in this recognition, that the very impulse to send diminishes, and with it the fatigue of trying to hold a world together. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Why? Because you have laid down the heavier yoke, the belief in separation. The more completely you accept that God is all presence, the less your thought wanders outward to rescue, the more it yields inward to behold. And in that beholding, harmony reveals itself where you are, because where you are is where God is, and where God is where your so-called patient is. Lo, I am with you always, not shuttling between you and another always. as the one life constituting both. Let us be simple. Stop sending. Stop reaching. Stop fixing. Be still and know that I am God. Let the phrase God is rise and fall without weaponizing it until even the need to say it dissolves in awareness. In that stillness, the fiction of two presences thins and vanishes, and with it the entire basis for healing at a distance. There is no distance. There is no healer. There is no helped. There is only the is of God revealed as what already is. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where separation seems, there is labor. Choose liberty by choosing oneness, and watch the imagined miles disappear into the light that was never absent. God is. That's all. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. If we do not take that up as instruction, we will be forever riding the weather of the senses. And the senses are weather-shifting clouds, never the sky. You cannot see spirit. You cannot hear it, taste it, touch it, smell it, or think it. Let that land. You cannot think God. You cannot wrap omnipresence in a syllable or seal it in a sensation. Yet spirit is the only presence. God is one. Therefore, what the senses report is not testimony about God. It is testimony about their own limits. We walk by faith, not by sight. The things which are seen are temporal. The things which are not seen are eternal. Will you take sides with the temporal against the eternal? Will you let a shadow tell you the truth about the sun? Here is the trap. A symptom shouts. A report arrives. A clock ticks. In that instant, the personal mind leaps to its feet, argue, plead, fix, hurry. It would marshal statements, recruit emotions, brace the will, and go to war. But all war presumes two powers. The moment you react to the appearance as if it were a presence, you have enthroned it. You have said by your very haste, you are power. Now I must gather a greater power to defeat you. And then you start feeding it by fear, by fascination, by timelines and forecasts. You feed it when you measure it each hour. You feed it when you lean into or away from it with equal intensity. As long as you believe there is power in a good thought, you are far from the kingdom because you have already conceded power to a bad one. Stop. Stop. Resist not evil, not because evil deserves welcome, but because the very act of resistance breathes oxygen into a nothing and calls it fire. What, then, is our stance? The simplest, and for that reason the most difficult for the personal mind. We observe the temptation to fear, and we do not follow it. We notice the surge to argue, and we do not give it a voice. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let your tongue fall out before you scold omniscience or flatter an appearance with attention. Return unto thy rest, O my soul. How? By the fact of God's allness, not by debate. God is, not God is, and therefore I will fix this. God is, and in that stillness, appearances loosen because they are no longer being held up by your belief. Denial in this way is not suppression. It is the refusal to grant a second power any reality or jurisdiction. You are not pushing a thought down. You are letting it pass unacknowledged, as you would let a passerby move on when you know your beloved is in the room. Do not ask the sensory world to testify for spirit. It cannot. The ear will report sound. The eye will report form. The skin will report pressure. That is their function. But you awareness, you bear witness to the one. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. The above is not a place. It is the altitude of recognition. When the gale of appearances rises, do not shout back into the wind. Be still, and know that I am God. That knowing is not a sentence. It is the hush in which the boisterous mind hears, "Peace, be still," and ceases its storm. My grace is sufficient for thee. Sufficient for what? For revealing what is eternally true without consultation from sense testimony. You will find this practical. A pain flares. Do not name it your pain. Do not hand it your passport. A notice arrives. Do not place it on the altar of your heart. Let it remain a piece of paper in an omnipresent God. A date looms. Do not crawl onto the timeline and be ruled by a clock. Eternity is not measured by hours. Each time you decline to personalize, dramatize, and weaponize an appearance, you starve the belief in a second presence. And the moment you stop granting power to appearances, you stop feeding the illusion that there is anything alongside God. Then harmony does not have to be imported. It is simply no longer obscured. Judge righteous judgment. Walk by that. Let the senses bring you their weather if they must. You abide as the sky. God is. That's all. And in that allness, the cloud without substance passes, leaving what never moved, presence, whole and undivided, shining as the only fact. Having laid down the practice of arguing with shadows, let us take up the simplest treatment in all spiritual work, the treatment that is not a technique at all. God is. Do not take those words as a charm. Do not string them like beads to calm the nerves. God is not an incantation. It is a door. You let it open, and you walk through, and on the other side, there is nothing left to do because there is no other side. God is. When that dawns, commentary collapses, diagnosis folds. The mind's tribunal is dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. The practitioner steps down from the bench, lays aside the robe of expertise, and discovers there was never a case to try before two powers. How do you use it? You do not use it. You let it use you. Let the phrase rise once like a key in the palm. God is. Hold it only long enough to unlock the room of silence, then let the key fall. Now sit, rest in the is. No adjectives, no outcomes, no bargaining, no therefore. The moment you add therefore, you have smuggled the personal doer back in with a plan. Be still and know that I am God. Not be still and design, not be still and predict. Be still and know. And the knowing here is not information, it is presence, acknowledging itself as the only presence. This two-word treatment heals without effort because there is no human energy in it, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. When you abide in, is the will relaxes, the timeline empties, the geography of here and there dissolves, and what remains is the one who ever was. I am that I am. Where would you send God from, God to reach God? In Him, we live and move and have our being. In the light of that, God does not push, it reveals. It does not conquer, it unveils. It does not improve a condition. It exposes the baselessness of the condition in the face of omnipresence. You will find the mind wanting to help. It will offer benevolent adjectives. It will volunteer a list of needs and the cleverest reasons why God should address them. Smile and let the tongue rest. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let the helpful mind grow quiet in the radiance of is. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. God is that very surrender. It is the moment the hand opens and the burden drops because the hand has discovered the arm that holds all. My grace is sufficient for thee. Sufficient for what? For being what God is, as the only life present. Where your assistance can only obstruct, practice it without performance. Walk into a room and inwardly let God is arise just once as a recognition, not as a signal flare. Then abide. When fear knocks, Let God is end the sentence before it starts. Do not go on to say, and therefore the rent, and therefore the body, and therefore the world. Stop at is. Let the isness erase the predicate. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Why? Because is carries its own completion. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from what? From the compulsion to add, to explain, to improve, to manage. A mother sat across from me once with the tremor of love that tries too hard. If I say God is enough times, she asked, will something happen? Not half as much as believing that your repetitions make God happen. We said it once together, God is, and then we let the words go. We watch the urge to speak return like a tide and recede, and in the ebb there was the still small voice, not noisy, not triumphant, simply obvious. The room felt like a field after rain. That was all. Appearances took care of themselves as appearances do when they are not nourished. But understand, the quiet we touched was the fact, and the fact was God. Let this be your methodless method. God is as the end of the personal mind. Say it if you must once and let it vanish into awareness. Wait without waiting. Listen without reaching. Rest in the is until even the resting is merely being itself. Then you will know why we do not send, do not strive, do not garnish truth with ornaments. God is. That's all. And in that allness, harmony is not achieved, it is revealed. Let us name it plainly and practice it simply, silent blessing. What is it? Not projecting love, not imagining light traveling like a beam from you to another, not pushing health, not manufacturing calm. Silent blessing is abiding as the recognition of God's wholeness as the only fact. God is one. Therefore, there is nothing to push upon anything. Silent blessing is the end of the personal will and the resting of consciousness in the presence that already fills all in all. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. If you feel yourself trying to make anything happen, stop. Stop. You have slipped back into doing. Begin again in stillness. Here is the inner sequence. Let it become as natural as breathing. First, notice the impulse to fix. It is quick. A word springs to the tongue. A plan rushes to the mind. A heat rises in the chest. Do not write it. Second, stop. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let your tongue fall out before you send a thought into the world to manage God's universe. Third, return to oneness. Let God is arise once, then release even the words into awareness. Fourth, rest there until peace is present. Not theatrical peace, not a glow, the quieted certainty of be still and know that I am God. If no peace comes, you have not yet stopped. Wait, wait without waiting, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. When the heart is poised and the will is unhitched, that is silent blessing. Healing without will is the natural activity of consciousness resting in oneness. Make this practical. There is tension in the family room. Voices rise. History parades its grievances. Your habit is to intervene, to explain, to quote wisdom into ears not listening. Instead, leave off the role. Slip inwardly into your closet and shut the door. Do not take sides with a person or a memory. Acquaint now thyself with him and be at peace. Let God is drop the pretense that there are two characters with separate lives to be reconciled. Do not aim silence at the room. Do not radiate calm like a technique. Abide. Peace. Be still. Is not a command to others. It is the arrest of your own inner storm. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Often the gale loses interest because you are no longer supplying wind. And if the noise continues, you have still blessed because you have refused a second power and rested in one. A troubling diagnosis is delivered. The personal mind races to strategies, images of organs repairing, affirmations arranged like soldiers, battles planned against a name. Stop. Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask. Carry the paper, if you must, to a chair, and sit. Be still, and know that I am God. Not be still and bargain for numbers. Not be still and visualize outcomes. Be still and know I am the resurrection and the life. Let that not be a sentence you throw at a condition. Let it be the presence recognized as the only life present. In him we live and move and have our being. Silent blessing here is not a counterforce. It is the absence of countering in which grace appears unobstructed. Night fear pays a visit, the mind rehearses locks and shadows, the hand moves to the lamp. Pause. Before you touch the world, touch the silence. God is. Underneath are the everlasting arms. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. For thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Do not chant. Listen. When the breath softens and the room becomes ordinary again, you have blessed not a house, but the belief in a second presence. Lo, I am with you always. Keep the rigor clear. If you are trying to make peace, you are still at war. If you are trying to send love, you are still believing love is absent over there and must be shipped. If you are trying to project light, you are secretly maintaining darkness as a power that must be overcome. Stop. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. Silent blessing is not addition, it is recognition. It is the practitioner disappearing as agenda and appearing as awareness of God alone. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, not because you produced it, but because you ceased obscuring it. So practice this everywhere. At the sink, in the office, on the phone. Notice the impulse to fix, stop, return to oneness, rest until peace is present. Then move, or do not move, but move from peace, not toward it. Do not inspect results, that is the doer. Waking again to take credit or blame. Take no thought. Let grace be grace. God is. That's all. In that allness, blessing happens of itself, without might, without power, by his Spirit alone. Now, the mind will object. Of course it will. It has been hired all its life to be the manager, the analyst, the foreman of outcomes. It asks, by what mechanism does this work? Where is the lever, the technique, the proven sequence? Listen gently and answer honestly. How shall the infinite be mechanized? Can the ocean be poured into a thimble and still be ocean? Who by taking thought can add a cubit to his stature? The wind bloweth where it listeth. Thou hearest the sound thereof, but canst not tell whence it cometh and whither it goeth. So is everyone that is born of the Spirit. Spirit is not operated, Spirit is recognized. God is one. As long as you believe there is power in a clever thought, you are far from the kingdom, because you have already reduced omnipresence to a tool and enthroned a second power to be overcome by it. Do you see the turn required? The mind wants a handle. The heart wants a hush. The letter insists, give me words to say and steps to follow. The Spirit answers, be still and know that I am God. Not be clever and adjust. Not be busy and persuade. Be still and know. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. The mechanism the mind craves would keep the mind in charge. The recognition we practice dethrones it. Our prayer is not, show me how to make God act, but Father, glorify thyself. And the response is never a blueprint. It is presence felt, not fashioned, received, not produced. Another objection comes wearing the robe of compassion. If I do not speak, if I do not lay on a hand, If I do not pour my heart outward, am I not indifferent? Isn't silence a kind of abandonment? No, it is the refusal to imprison your brother in an appearance. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Love thy neighbor as thyself is not too loving across a gap. It is recognition that there is no gap. God and the practitioner and the patient are all one. To sit in silent awareness of God's allness is to refuse subtle violence, the violence of suggestion, the violence of fixing, the violence of seeing your neighbor as a case to be managed. Behold, the kingdom of God is within you, within him, within her, within all. In that beholding, you will find yourself moved, sometimes to speak a word, to bring soup, to drive a car, fine. But let the word and the soup come from peace, not as substitutes for it. Comfort ye, my people. True comfort is the presence recognized, not sentiment projected. Then the most insistent protest, am I doing nothing? You are ceasing to do the one thing that obstructs personal will. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. That is not self-deprecation. It is the doorway. When you lay down the labor of being cause, you become available to be witness. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Why? Because you have laid down the heavier yoke, the imagined responsibility to make omnipresence present. You are not idle, you are yielded. You are not apathetic, you are transparent. You are not doing nothing, you are letting the Father be what the Father is here as all. Here is a self-test as practical as a clock. If there is strain in you, you are doing. If there is urgency, a drumbeat in the chest that says now or never, you are doing. If there is pressure to produce an outcome, to check the room, to peek at the patient, to watch the phone, you are doing. Stop. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let your tongue fall out before you take command of God's universe. Return to the two-word treatment once God is, and let even that fall into silence. Cast all your care upon him, for he careth for you. Take no thought for your life. Wait without waiting until peace is present. When peace is present, move or do not move, but move from peace, not toward it. If peace does not come, you have not yet stopped. Do not dress your agitation in holy language and call it prayer. Let me say it as simply as the heart requires. The work is not effort. The work is the abandonment of effort into grace. Harmony does not arrive because you have wrestled it here. Harmony appears because you have ceased hiding it with your own breath. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from what? From the compulsion to fix, to send, to strive, to prove. Let your compassion be bold enough to trust oneness. Let your intelligence be humble enough to surrender mechanism. Let your practice be quiet enough to hear the still small voice after the earthquake of urgency and the fire of fear have spent themselves. God is, that's all. In that allness, you are not doing nothing. You are present as the transparency through which grace, ever at hand, is seen to be the only presence there ever was. Let us seal this not with applause, but with practice tonight, not next week, not when the schedule relaxes. Tonight, set aside a few minutes, enter thy closet, and shut the door. Take no list, bring no case. Do not ask, do not promise. Be still and know that I am God. Let the two-word treatment arise once God is, and then allow even that to fall into the quiet. Hold those teeth together if you must. Let your tongue fall out before you instruct omniscience. Wait without waiting. If peace comes, sit in it as in a field at dusk, with no agenda but presence. If peace does not come, do not fabricate it. You have not yet stopped. Stop, and sit until the storm in you remembers the command already spoken from within. Peace, be still. Now take this beyond an occasion into a life. Each morning before the foot finds the floor, turn inward and notice the fact God is, not God is, therefore. Stop at is. Rest there 3 breaths or 30 until the day is recognized as God's day. This is the day the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it, not because something favorable is forecast, but because presence is presence. Do not brief God on your calendar. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. At midday, when pressure starts its drum, the email, the voice, the memory go again into the inner room. 30 seconds will do if it is honest. Refuse the 2-power premise. Cast thy burden upon the Lord. Say nothing. Listen. Let the will release its grip. I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. Return to activity only when you can move from peace, not toward it. Each evening, make room for silence as you would for supper. Sit without result seeking and do not rise until some measure of quiet assurance is present, not a glow to be proud of. The simple certainty of God is, thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly, not with trinkets, but with himself, felt as sufficiency. If the mind argues for tomorrow's plans, hold your peace and let the argument pass. My grace is sufficient for thee. Let grace be grace. Do this, and you will find that healing ceases to be an event and becomes a climate. The atmosphere of consciousness shifts from weather to sky. Harmony appears not as a flash, but as a way of being. Pray without ceasing is not a marathon of words. It is a constancy of recognition. As the tide of oneness rises, old islands of fear and management no longer show their rocks above the surface. They are there only when you lower the waterline of awareness. Join your practice with another, or 2, or 10. Where 2 or more are gathered in my name in the nature of oneness, there am I in the midst. Sit together for 5 quiet minutes in a home, an office, a classroom. No petitions, no bargains, no advice. Be still. Let the room feel like a held breath that is finally exhaled. Peace be to this house. If there be 10 righteous in a city, 10 who will hold to God as without embroidery the city itself is lifted. Do not underestimate united consciousness. It does not coerce, it reveals. And now, let identity be concluded in its source. As long as God is, I am. I and my Father are one. In him we live and move and have our being. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from effort, from fear, from the tyranny of outcomes. Let this be your discipline. Morning remembrance, midday return, evening stillness, not as tasks, but as entrances into what already is. Be very firm in your understanding of your own inadequacy, that you may rest in his sufficiency. Then the day will live you, the word will keep you, and grace will reveal harmony as the only fact God is. That's all.